Aaron's coming at you with a, whoop, we're going. Is this wheel going? It's turning. Oh yeah, now we're live. Okay, cool. Hey, what's up, Facebook? This is Coach Melanie doing another Q&A today. So yesterday I got a really great question from one of our members who they wanted to know how long before they start seeing muscle development. So there's a lot to unpack with this question, and I'm going to attack it from a couple of different angles. So I'm going to present you the question and the answer based on what a few different types of people might think about when they think about this question. So first off, visible muscle development definition, toning. When we're talking about all of these things, whether it's getting swole or toning or getting buff, it's really all the same thing we're talking about. We're talking about muscle hypertrophy. I know that there's a lot of lingo out there to sell it as a different thing to women than it is to men, but honestly it's the same thing. It's the growth of the muscle. Toning on one person, hypertrophy, muscle gains on another person. It's all hypertrophy. So first off, understand that you are going to have a limit of how big your muscles get, in part because of your own personal biological ceiling, hormones, all that kind of stuff. And it can be really confusing because a lot of the most prevalent images that are out there for bodybuilding and muscle hypertrophy, a lot of the really extreme photos are people who are taking anabolic steroids to achieve that look. So I don't train people with steroids, but I also I don't begrudge people who choose to take that route. I do believe in body autonomy, all that kind of stuff, but it's not without risks, right? And in general, I'm teaching and coaching people who are wanting a more natural approach to bodybuilding, muscle development, all that kind of stuff. Now that said, it's going to take longer, but how long is the question? How long do I have to wait to see those muscles? So there's a couple of things that go into play here. One is the muscle development itself, how the growth of the muscle. And the other part is making sure that you can actually see it through whatever layer of fat you have. So we'll address the fat loss thing first. Now for most people, if you want to see visible abs, if you want to start seeing the texture of the abs through the skin, you're talking about getting down to around 18% body fat or lower. 18% is kind of the bottom of the range that's considered healthy normal for most cisgender women. Most cisgender men can go down to as low as 13% as a sustainable normal, but it's not sustainable normal for most people, okay? And when you see bodybuilders on stage performing, they're down at like anywhere between 7 and 13%. Like they are super low, and they don't maintain that year round. Just to be clear, nobody walks around with like that shrink wrapped shredded wheat veins bulging look all year long. The bodybuilders that do that, they look different in their off season. So the first thing you need to do when you're thinking about looking at your body and saying, I want to see muscle development, I want to see changes, is just kind of get a grip on reality. Like, you know, everything's fucking photoshopped, right? But you can get really good muscle development, visible muscle development. You can walk around with that visible muscle development. It does take time. So how much time? Okay, provided, and this is a big if you are doing a hypertrophy focused program with correct nutrition for that goal, you may be able to gain up to a quarter pound per week of muscle mass with really dedicated training if you are pre-genetically disposed to do so. So rate of fat loss that's considered healthy normal, 2 pounds per week. Pretty much anybody can do that who has excess body fat. Once you get down into a normal range, it becomes difficult to lose that. Gaining mass, gaining muscle is much, much slower, and you will hit a biological ceiling at some point. For women, that ceiling is a lot lower, as far as like you're just not going to get Arnold Schwarzenegger big. The ladies that are super huge in bodybuilding competitions, they are taking steroids to get that look, to achieve that look, and they work very hard at it, but it is augmented by anabolic steroids. So keep that in mind. So if you are looking at trying to track progress and you have a focused, dedicated program for muscle hypertrophy and your nutrition is correct, look at taking pictures once every 6 weeks to start to see the change in muscle development and body shape. Anything less than 6 weeks, you're not going to see real tangible, visible progress. So once every 6 weeks for somebody who's doing a hypertrophy training cycle, I usually look at an 18-week cycle for that person before, cycling off or whatever, and giving the body a break. Now, when it comes to hypertrophy training or bodybuilding type training or muscle definition or toning, if somebody is an absolute beginner, or if they're predisposed genetically to being able to gain muscle mass very, very quickly, they may see rapid progress in the first few weeks, especially if they have a low body fat percentage. But for most people who have, average genes, middle-aged, are just going about their day, most people are going to have to really focus in on it. Now, the main thing to remember with hypertrophy training is, number one, more is more. Number two, failure is your friend. Okay, so more is more. That means that you want to be training 4 or 5 days a week, hitting all of the muscle groups in the body with with intention, at least twice per week is my general recommendation. Now, there are a lot of different recipes out there for muscle hypertrophy training. It's like asking a baker, hey, I want to make a cake. How do I make a cake? It's like, okay, which recipe do you want? And there's a lot of different ones. So there are different approaches that work well, but classic bodybuilding range is 8 to 12 reps to failure, 4 to 5 days per week. A lot of bodybuilders don't actually take a rest day because they will do a body split training and they do work out 6-7 days per week for hours per day, like more than an hour, a couple of hours per day. So more is more when it comes to hypertrophy training and going to failure. Now, if you're just getting started, don't do 7 days a week training. You're going to kill yourself. It's fine. The first thing I would recommend to somebody who's a beginner starting to look for those progress and those mass gains is, the very first thing is make sure you're lifting heavy enough. Okay, so when I say 8 to 12 reps to failure, I mean that you are going to select a weight that if you could do 13, 14, 15, 20 reps with it, it's too light. You went way too light. 8 to 12 reps to failure means that you're not going to be able to do more than 12 reps, even if your life depended on it. So the idea is you're lifting heavy and you're lifting all the way to failure. Now, this differs greatly from some other types of training. So people who are very purist about strength training, for example, will do low reps and never to failure. And there's virtue to doing that, especially if you're training for maximal strength, like a powerlifting competition or something where you're looking to express maximum strength, maximum force against an object. But if you're looking to actually develop muscle size, you're going to go to failure. Okay, so you can lift heavy and not get bulky. It's true. You can lift very, very high reps and not get strong or bulky, but have really good endurance. So these are the three main things that you want to think about when you think about strength training. You think about it on a continuum. There's strength, there's hypertrophy, and there's endurance. Okay, so strength, low reps, heavy weight, generally speaking. Okay, that's the typical recipe. Low reps, heavy weight. Hypertrophy, right in the middle. Fairly heavy weight still, going to failure. And then anything that's higher reps, like 15, 20, 25 reps, then we're talking endurance. And endurance has wonderful benefits too, and it has some crossover with cardiovascular training as well. So all of these have their place. Doing strength training on this end of the spectrum will increase bone density, increase connective tissue strength, reduce risk of injury if you do it correctly. And pure strength training is what I do recommend for a lot of people who have had injuries in the past, where you're doing lower reps, a lot of rest in between, relatively heavy weights, so that you can stimulate that bone density and that connective tissue strength as well. Bodybuilding training, you do have to watch out for things like tendinitis developing and that kind of thing. That's pretty common with people who engage in that 8 to 12 to failure range for bodybuilding and muscle hypertrophy. So I do recommend that you do some strength and some endurance in your program, even if you want to focus on muscle hypertrophy. Okay, so hypertrophy, 8 to 12 to failure. You know you got to lift really heavy. You know you got to lift until you can't lift no more. Like, to failure, guys. Failure is success. Failure is winning when it comes to muscle hypertrophy. But what happens if you don't have a heavy enough weight? That's happening to a lot of people right now who don't have a full gym in their home and who are not ready to risk their lives going back to a physical location of a gym out in the world. For those people, there is hope, even if you don't have a full set of dumbbells for something. And it's called dynamic tension. Dynamic tension, the main concept with dynamic tension is that you are crushing, squeezing the grip, squeezing it tight. Let's say if you're doing an arm exercise, right? And that tension that you are creating, that radiating tension, will mimic the feel of the or the stimulus of if the weight was much, much heavier. So if you treat the weight like it's very, very heavy and you are tensing the muscles, tensing them on your own, then you are going to create that dynamic tension and be able to elicit a response that's similar to a weight that's much, much heavier. Another way we can get around the not enough heavy weight issue is to do time under tension reps. So that would be like going very, very slowly, working on your tempo. So like, let's say, for example, okay, I'm doing my dynamic tension with my bicep curls because I only have this, 10-pound pair of dumbbells, and I could easily do those for more than 12 reps. So I'm going to really crush the grip, squeeze everything tight so that I'm feeling genuinely fatigued before 12. Now I'm going to do my lower body. Now, lower body, I can't tense my toes, right? I can't crush the grip of my feet. So what I'm going to do here instead is I'm going to do a very slow negative squat, or slow negative split squat, or Bulgarian split squat, or sumo squat, or whatever it is. And I'm going to work on taking 10 seconds to get all the way down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then explode up. 1. Okay, that was 1 rep, and then do that 12 times, right? So increasing the time under tension is another way to elicit a heavy lifting response if we don't have the weights available for that. So dynamic tension, creating tension within your own muscles, fighting your own muscles against themselves, or doing slow negatives. So that is what I recommend for hypertrophy training. Number 1, make sure you're doing, like, how long will it take? Probably 18 weeks to notice something really significant. Minimum 6-week increments. Take pictures of yourself every 6 weeks, flexing in the same position, in front of the same mirror, with the same lighting, okay? Once every 6 weeks. Don't expect them to look like before and afters that you see on most, like, magazines and shit, because all that shit's airbrushed, okay? And make sure that you are doing focused heavy lifting, okay? And then third part is make sure you're eating enough food, okay? It is possible to do muscle hypertrophy and fat loss at the same time, but it's not easy, which is why most bodybuilders do a cycling kind of diet, where they will do a bulk. You'll hear them say things like bulking season, right? So in their off season, they're eating a lot of food. They're working at putting on more muscle mass because they're doing that heavy strength training. They're eating a lot of food, not only for recovery, but also for muscle growth. And also on top of that, they are gaining some fat. And then they cut Cutting would mean like a really strict fat loss diet. And while they're doing this, they typically don't lift as heavy because on the lower caloric restrictions, it is difficult to put that energy out, okay? So for most beginners, they don't want to go through something as extreme as a bulking cutting cycle. And honestly, I don't recommend it for a lot of people, especially if anyone out there has had any kind of eating disorders or dysfunctional relationship with food. Bulking and cutting is hard on you mentally, okay? So so what is the alternative? The alternative is to do either very slow fat loss or to pick a priority. So if you are over 18% body fat, you're not going to be able to see a whole lot of muscle. If you want that shrink wrap shredded wheat vibe, you may want to cut first, get the excess body fat off, maybe focus on a more varied training cycle with more endurance and strength and hypertrophy and a little bit of everything and more rest in between, and then getting into the heavier hypertrophy training as you add calories back in, because again, you don't want to diet forever, and hypertrophy training does lend itself well to when you're ready to be done with a diet and start gradually adding calories back in. And this touches on another crossover subject. A lot of people who I've worked with in the past, and particularly women, but some men as well, will have dieted so long, caloric restriction dieted so long, that they can no longer lose weight, and they often get that little stress tire in the middle. An all too common but relatively extreme example is I've worked with several people who are in their 50s and 60s and only eating about 800 calories per day. Why? Because they've gradually reduced calories in an effort to lose fat over many, many years. And they never lose the fat, so they keep cutting the calories. Okay, so now what you have to do with a person who's in that space, who's stuck, they're not losing the excess fat, and on top of that, they are way under caloried. Keep in mind, nobody should be going below 1200, even on a fat loss journey. You shouldn't be going below 1200. I don't know how medical professionals reconcile doing these 800 calorie diet plans that are out there. But in any case, so you're going to get to a point where you have to add calories back in, and you might still have fat to lose. So the way you do that is, number one, you track your current caloric intake very closely. Make sure you're getting enough protein as your base, number one, which is typically going to be your lean body weight in grams of protein for most people. And then add in 100 calories more per week as you exponentially ramp up your activity. So this is a good time. This is a good, if you're at a space in your fat loss journey where you're like, you know what, I've been dieting for a while, I'm plateaued, I don't know what to do with this, I can't go any lower on my calories, and I'm not losing any weight. You may want to try now mixing up your intensity, going higher intensity and gradually increasing calories by about 100 per week. And this can be really unnerving for people who have dieted for a while, but yes, you can increase your calories and continue to lose weight. Wow, I know that's a lot. That's a lot to unpack, guys. Okay, so if you need help with that, I am here for you. Okay, so go ahead, and if you're already a member of the Nerd Gym, you can send me questions on Voxer. If you are not yet a member of the Nerd Gym, I'll put my link around somewhere. You can do a free consultation with me on Zoom, and we can talk about it. But yes, so how fast, what was the question that I started out with? Woo, 20 minutes in, and yes, I think we've covered pretty much the question, when will I see muscles? When will I see muscles? If you are doing dedicated training, you will look at every 6 weeks. 6 weeks bare minimum dedicated training to see a visible difference in muscle size, toning, definition, whatever you want to call it. It's all hypertrophy to me. All right, guys, I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Bye.